Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here at Activate Learn on Twitter. Thought I'd do a very quick book review. A review of a book that I've just finished just now. So I haven't even had a chance to look online to read anything more about this author, about why he's written this book or what people thought about it, nothing. So I started reading this book yesterday and I finished it today. Now I have a lot of this author's books, and if you've seen my bookshelf tour, you would see what those books are. However, I was really surprised with this one. The book I'm talking about is Ian McEwan's Amsterdam. When I got this from the library, I just looked at the author's name. I thought, great, Ian McEwan, Amsterdam. I didn't know that he had won the Booker Prize for this book. I must admit, I don't usually go for books that have won prizes because, yeah, the ones that I've read, you know how it is. Anyway, regardless, let's set aside the Booker Prize that it received and let's talk about the story. Now, the story is really about two guys who happen to be ex-lovers of Molly, okay? Now, these two people, one of them is in the process of writing a symphony. His name is Clive, and the other guy is the editor of a tabloid newspaper called Vernon. So the very first chapter sets the scene, and they are at the funeral of Molly, and we find out Molly had taken a turn for the worse so she had an illness, and it got her quite quickly, and she passed away. And so all her details, the funeral arrangements and all stuff like that was done by her husband George. And George as well did not like Molly's ex-lovers, so he didn't really like Clive or Vernon. And even though he was Vernon's, boss as well, or manager or something, basically he worked in the industry as well. So George doesn't like Molly's ex-lovers. We don't really get to know Molly that much, except to find out that she had more lovers as well. And yeah, so Molly happens to be a character who I would have loved to have known more about her, but the story is centered around these two blokes. So what happens is these two blokes, Clive and Vernon, have some sort of a friendship. I wouldn't really call it a friendship. It's that type of friendship where one friend makes more of an effort than the other friend. Okay, we've all had friendships like that. They're not really friendships. They're kind of like they get in and out of your life, but they're not true friendships. These two guys just strike me as odious. I just didn't like either of them. So what happens is both Clive and Vernon have these situations happen to them in their life around the same time that get them to start thinking about, in fact, they don't even think, they act on kind of pure selfish acts, and they get driven not by moral grounds or what they could have done, but they take their decisions based on very selfish reasons. So Clive goes off into the Lakes District and goes for a walk and hikes through the Lakes District to try and get an inspiration to finish his symphony. So his entire thinking and his life is completely enveloped in his symphony. That's all he thinks about. And in fact, he big notes himself. He thinks he's the big wig when it comes to symphonies. He has tickets on himself. I don't know if that's an Australian saying, but if we come across people like that, we just say they have tickets on themselves. He comes across a situation where a woman is raped by someone at the Lakes District, and he doesn't go to the police to report it, okay? So instead, he walks back and he continues and finishes his symphony. Meanwhile, Vernon, on the other hand, is handed a pack of photographs that show a foreign secretary, Garmany, his name is, and this foreign secretary likes to get dressed up in women's clothing And because his newspaper is a tabloid and the ratings haven't been so good, he thinks, right, we're going to put this out there and, you know, it'll pick up the ratings and my newspaper would be fantastic and, you know, he'll be the talk about town. But what happens is the opposite. These two guys make a pact with each other because they get, I guess, scared during Molly's funeral, that given that if something happens in their life, who would be there to make funeral arrangements? Who would be there to kind of put the finishing touches to their life? So they make this pact as they will help each other out. And they try to, when these two situations happen, they force each other to stand up to themselves. So Vernon tells Clive that he should have reported it to the police, and he pushes him to report it to the police. Clive, on the other hand, says, well, you shouldn't have published these photos of this bloke in these clothes. And so they're egging each other on, and so they get angry with each other. They're two despicable characters anyway. But then we see them go to Amsterdam and make some kind of euthanasia pact. And the ending is actually quite weird. So, look, this is a book that I've just read, and I have not explored the concepts in here, the themes in here. I'm angry at these two blokes. They're not likable by any stretch of the imagination. I would have loved to have known more about Molly as well. I feel she is not part of the story as much as she is at the beginning and at the end of the book. And I must admit, this book really, for an Ian McEwan book, it didn't really grab me as much as his other books. And I must admit, the storyline was a bit bizarre, a bit strange for me. The writing itself, look, the writing is quite nice, but I think I just I just didn't like the characters, and I'm really struggling to think what the themes are in here, apart from selfishness, egotism, short-sightedness. Maybe McEwan wanted us to feel this way about these two characters. Maybe that was his intention. I don't know. But for a first cut straight off the back, having read this book and finished it within, say, 5 minutes ago, that's my thinking. I'm going to put this aside now because I've got 3 of Amélie Nothom's books to read. But yeah, I must admit, this one, that's not to say that, you know, his books aren't great. I actually quite like Ian McEwan's. I just didn't like this one. Oh well, at least I read it, and that's it. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. This is total lack of preparation, but there you go. These are just my first thoughts. Oh well. Okay, bye for now.